I'm Casey.
And I'm Fallon.
And this is
Render the Darkness. Sorry, my hair is driving me nuts. Scary.
So, we have not recorded in a little while, so welcome back to us. We've had a lot of busy, hectic life things going on, so it's taken us a minute to get back to it. But the fun fact for this episode is we have a new office. Yay!
No more glitchy.
No more glitching, green screen, no more in and out of the frame. We have space to... In fact, she did it on purpose. Just plenty of space.
Yeah, okay, plenty of space.
Plenty of space. We now have open range. It's just a much better setup. Much more watchable, we hope. That is our fun fact for this episode. Welcome to our new office and our new space. We hope that you like the setup a little bit better. If you'd like to see a little more in the background, let us know. If you'd like to see a little less in the background, let us know. If you'd like to see a little more or less in the front of the background, let us know, i.e. our faces. We can definitely put on some masks and hide them if you need us to.
I will not do that. I like to breathe, you know? So.
Anyway, welcome back to us. Hi, guys. Yeah. And that brings us to the case.
Yes, so this one, I know it's been probably a couple weeks since we did the first part. This is the second part of the murder of Susan Daniel Smith. In the last part, we really just kind of got to know some of the main people in the story and how they all met each other and things of that nature. Where we left off in part one was that Susan was pregnant with Mark's baby, and he really didn't think that it was his, but he had told her that he would take really good care of her and the baby. Now, Susan and Mark said... What?
Ominous.
Dun,
dun, dun, dun.
Now, Susan and Mark said their goodbyes at a Super America gas station in Pikeville. Now, it had been days since Susan had heard from Mark, so trying to find out more about where he was, she kept calling Ron Poole. She would call him every day until she couldn't stand it any longer, and so she drove to where he was, asking for the number where Mark was staying. Now, after begging continuously, he finally gave her the number, which belonged to a hotel in Florida. Now, when she called, his wife Kathy answered the phone and said that he was gone, but he would be back later. Now, Susan asked her to please have him call her back because it was about business. A little while later, he called her back, and she would tell him that she might have her sister bring her to come see him, but he told her not to do that because that he would be back soon to finish the, quote, chop shop case. Now, when May rolled around, Susan was now 4 months pregnant. Now, she decided to call Mark about his responsibility to help take care of the baby, which her sister kept begging her to do. Now, at first, the phone call was pleasant, but then it turned into an argument. After the phone call, she would tell her sister how the conversation had gone. She had asked him how they liked it in Florida and asked if they had found a place to live. He would answer that they really liked it there and that they had bought a townhouse. Now, when he said that, Susan got really upset and said, quote, well, I hope you all are enjoying yourselves, and you better enjoy it while you can, because when I'm through with you, there won't be any townhouse. I can tell you that.
Oh. Well, that took a really sharp turn real fast, didn't it?
It did. Now, Mark asked her what she meant, and she would say that he was going to take care of the baby, or she was going to go to their house, and they could figure it out in front of Kathy. Now, before she hung up, Mark would tell her that as soon as he got back, they would figure things out. On June 5th at 6 p.m., Susan received a call from Ron Poole letting her know that Mark had just got there, and she had asked him to hand Mark the phone. Susan thought that he would ask her to come see him, but he didn't, and he seemed to be more annoyed to even be talking to her. He then told her that he would call her back and hung up. Now, as soon as she was off the phone, she asked her sister to help her with her hair and makeup. After she was done getting dressed, she called Ron Poole and asked him to give her a ride to the Landmark Hotel. Susan went to her room and put her things down, called Mark, and went straight to his room.
Okay.
On June 7th, Susan called Shelby and told her how things were going, and Shelby asked her about Mark. And Susan would tell her that he didn't want to talk about the baby and he wouldn't give her anything to help. Now, Shelby begged for her sister to come back and just raise the baby on her own and forget about Mark. But Susan wouldn't do it. She thought things would change once the baby was born. Now, soon Mark let Ron know that he did not like the fact that she was staying at the hotel. So he called Shelby and asked her to go pick her sister up. But she had told him that her car was in the shop that day, so she couldn't do it. Thursday, June 8th, Susan called Shelby 2 times from the hotel and said that she was going to have Mark bring her back home that night or in the morning. A Friday and Saturday came and went, and Shelby didn't hear anything from Susan.
Uh-oh.
Sunday, Susan still hadn't called, and at this point, Shelby was starting to get really worried. Now, she thought that if anything was to happen to her, it would have been her fault because she had begged her to keep asking Mark about child support. At 5 p.m., Shelby's phone rang, and on the other end, it was Ron Poole, asking if she had heard from Susan. She would tell him that she hadn't heard from her since Thursday, June 8th. Then she told him that maybe she went back to Kenneth. So she called him, and he said that he hadn't seen or heard from her in days. Now, Shelby thought maybe Kenneth had something to do with her disappearance, but she wasn't really sure. On June 12th, Ron called Shelby again, this time saying that he wasn't able to find her and that he had actually found her clothes and a landmark paper bag along with tennis shoes and makeup, and that her hairbrush had been found by the maid on the sink. He also told her that her purse was found in the room as well. 3 more days had gone by without any word from Susan. That Wednesday, Ron and Mark went out to lunch, and Ron asked Mark about Susan, and he would say that the last time he had seen her was on June 7th. But when Shelby heard that, she knew he was lying, because Susan had actually called her, if you remember, on the 8th, crying about Mark. Now, she told Ron that Mark needed to call her because it was now a week since anyone had seen Susan, and he was the last person to see her. The next day, Mark called Shelby and explained that from what he knew, she had gone to meet Tommy, hopefully I say this right, Estep?
That's right. That's how I would say it.
And she told him that she would be staying in Chicago for a while. He also said that she was supposed to call him, and when she did, he would have her call her. Now, Shelby had a strange feeling and called Ron on June 14th, and she heard Mark talking in the background and asked Ron if he was acting strange. And Ron would tell her no, and he'd ask Mark if he had found Susan yet, and he would reply no. Shelby waited for a while, hoping Mark would leave, and she called Ron back, and this time she was able to talk to him because Mark did leave. Now, at this point, Shelby was now worried that Mark had done something to Susan and asked what she should do. He suggested that she call her supervisor, Terry, hopefully I say this correctly, Hulse, I'm just going to go with Hulse, and tell him what was going on. Now, when she called, she told him everything and told him about her suspicions about Mark. And Terry listened to her story and told her that if Susan shows up, he will have her take a test, and if it turns out that the baby is Mark's, that he would deal with it then. Now, Shelby got the idea out of that call that he didn't believe anything that she had told him. On June 16th, Shelby called the Kentucky State Police and filed a missing persons report, which was logged at 10:52 a.m. Detective Richard Ray received the report and called her back at noon. After hearing everything that Shelby had to say, he became suspicious of Mark as well. Now, he promised to help find Susan and asked her to let him know if she hears anything at all from her. On June 19th, Susan was officially declared a missing person. That same day, Detective called Tommy Estep about Susan's disappearance, and he would explain that he had called Shelby before she went missing to let her know that he was going to be going to Princeton to meet with her about a job and to let Susan know, but he never heard from her. On July 12th, Shelby asked that Mark be given a polygraph test, but they would tell her that they needed more evidence, but now, for some reason, she was told that she needed to take a polygraph test. They wanted to make sure that she really didn't know where Susan was and that this wasn't a scheme to get Mark into trouble, but she would pass that test. Now, by November 1989, there was still no word from Susan, and she was getting close to her due date. Now, Shelby was sure that she was no longer alive. As Thanksgiving grew closer, Shelby heard that Susan had called one of her friends, Josie Thorpe, that lived in Freeburg. Shelby went to see her and asked her if Susan had told her where she was, but Josie said that she hadn't. After talking to her for a while, Shelby had the suspicion that the caller wasn't Susan, and she told Ron that it could have been Mark behind the calls. On May 18th, 1990, Mark was asked to take a polygraph to try and clear his name, and he was told that his rental car was being investigated. Now, Mark failed the test, and the FBI lab found blood, clothing fibers, and other evidence in the car that something bad had happened.
That's a pretty good sign that something bad probably did happen.
Now, on May 20th, Mark's wife picked him up from the airport and they went to a bar at the Holiday Inn. Kathy ordered a strong drink, fearing that Mark had hurt Susan. She wanted to prepare herself to ask him directly. She looked at him and asked him if he had been sleeping with Susan, if the baby could have been his, and if he did in fact kill her. He would reply to each question with a yes.
Was she wired?
No.
Oh.
Now, Kathy was so upset about what he had just admitted that she slapped him out of his chair. And he would just say that he would need to go to get a lawyer Monday. Now, on Monday, May 22nd, Mark obtained a lawyer and then resigned from the FBI. The lawyer that he hired was Bruce Zimmett. Now, Bruce called, hopefully I say this correctly, Runyon.
Runyon.
Runyon?
Mm-hmm.
Runyon. Who was a Commonwealth lawyer. Sorry, it took me my mind a minute to register that. And explained that he needed to talk to him. But he wanted to use the 11th rule of the criminal procedure, which meant that anything that was said during that phone call couldn't be used in court. Now, he would agree, but he was really surprised that he was getting a confession to murder because they didn't have any evidence whatsoever against him. Mark's lawyer had told him what happened and was talking about maybe going for manslaughter. Now, Runyon would agree because Mark didn't do it on purpose. And that quote, Susan had backed him into a corner. Yeah, that's what I thought whenever I read that.
So, this pregnant lady backed this FBI agent into a corner and forced him to harm her. That's what he's claiming right now.
That's what he's claiming, yeah.
This trained man who's trained to have self-defense tactics where he doesn't hurt someone is claiming that he had no choice but to harm her.
Yep, that's what they're saying. Now, he said they got into a fight and he had killed her. Now, the next few weeks they negotiated a plea bargain, and by then Runyon had made everyone believe that manslaughter was the only charge that they could go for since there wasn't a body. And Mark was the only one who knew where her body was. Now, the negotiations started to get a little heated between Zimmett and, the lawyers and Zimmett would say that Mark would only take as much as 12 years. But
that's their plea deal right there. Tell us where she is and we'll give you such and such deal.
Yeah, that's what they're negotiating right now. Yeah, because he was saying that Mark would only agree for 12 years.
If he would tell them where she was, though.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. But Runyon said that he would have to take at minimum 16 years. Now, Zimmett and Mark would eventually agree to the 16-year sentence.
I mean, he should, because if he did kill her while she was pregnant, then he killed 2 people.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
Yeah, that kind of upset me. But anyway, on March 4th, 1990, Special Agent Jim Huggins and Lieutenant Paul Maynor went to Miami as witnesses where Mark gave his lawyer his statement. Now, around 8 p.m., Huggins would ask that Mark tell them where Susan's body was before he gave his explanation of what happened so they could go out and find her. And Mark would tell them that he had, quote, placed Susan down a gulch close to Harmon Branch, about 9 miles from Pikeville. And then in detail, he described where they would be able to find her body. While Lieutenant Maynor called the Pikeville Post, some agents from the FBI and the Kentucky State Police waited for directions to find Susan. At 8:45 p.m., Agents Smith and Adam from the FBI and Fred Davidson, who had a search dog, got to where Susan's body was supposed to be. But the area was badly overgrown, and they couldn't see her, and the search dog Bingo couldn't pick up her scent either. Now, right before dark, someone thought that they had found a skull. The rest of the men arrived at the area and would uncover a human skeleton. The rib cage was intact and slightly covered by leaves. The arm and leg bones were a little farther from the body, and they thought more than likely they were moved by animals.
Has she been gone long enough that her body would be deteriorated down to bone?
Yeah, because it was, it was like June.
Yeah.
It was June when she went missing, and this is close to November, after Thanksgiving.
Okay.
But yeah, the jawbone was missing 2 molars, and there was no flesh left on the bones. The only thing that identified the remains of Susan was a gold chain and a cross that had been found, which Shelby had let Susan borrow.
Aw.
On June 4th, 1990, Mark confessed to killing Susan, making him the first FBI agent in the 82 history to be charged with murder. Now, the confession that he started reading had some information in it that wasn't really true. So Mark would say, quote, "I now wish to tell the complete truth regarding this matter." Now, the plea agreement that he made was that he wouldn't be prosecuted for any false statements that he had made concerning the investigation. So he claimed that he was going through a lot with the trial, moving to Florida, and Susan always asking for help with her pregnancy. Now, in his confession, he would say that they talked about what he wanted to do when the baby was born. He wanted to take a blood test to make sure the baby was his, but she always got mad when he mentioned it. Now, he even claimed that he asked her if she would think about getting an abortion or letting him take the baby, but she refused both options. Now, he would say that he got to Pikeville around 7 p.m. on June 8th, and around 8:30 p.m., she started calling his room at the hotel, yelling at him for not taking responsibility for the baby. Now, at 10:30 p.m., she went to his room, and the conversation quickly turned into a loud argument, and it was getting louder by the second. So he asked her to take a drive with him. During the drive, he said that she kept saying that she was going to, quote, hang him over the fact that the baby was his. She threatened to tell everyone about the affair and the baby. He would tell her that if the baby was indeed his, that he and his wife would adopt the baby because they could give the baby a much better life than she could. He also told her that the court would grant him custody because of her past problems. Now, after hearing that, he claimed that she got really mad and started hitting him in the face, which sent him into a full rage. And he said, quote, "Reached across the car and grabbed her by the throat with both hands. I straddled her, actually sitting on top of her in the seat. He then started choking her and telling her, quote, shut up. He would also claim that he choked her for about 2 minutes and she still continued to hit him. Now, when he stopped moving, he thought that she was unconscious, but he checked her pulse and he didn't find one. Now, he started mouth to mouth and he hit her in the chest, but nothing made her breathe. He then said that he started to panic and he took her out of the car, realizing that she was wearing his clothes. So he took them off of her and put her body in the trunk. He went back to the hotel, took a shower, and waited for sunrise.
Well, Mark's just a real piece of work, isn't he?
Yeah. Now, the next morning at around 6:30 a.m., he took another shower and went to a meeting in Lexington at the courthouse, where he parked the car with Susan's body still in the trunk. He left around 5 p.m. and returned to Pikeville around 7 p.m., stopping along to get something to drink at McDonald's. Then he drove around to find a place to dispose of the body.
Oh, let me just stop and get something to drink at McDonald's with this body in my trunk.
Yeah, he left it at the courthouse. It's just...
I wonder if the fact that he was an FBI agent, I wonder if that, contributed to the level of arrogance that he seems to have in this whole thing.
Probably. Now, on June 5th, Shelby was called and asked to come the next morning, and she asked if Susan was dead. How do we say it? Brennan? Yeah. Would tell her yes, and she would ask if Mark had done it. And again, he would say yes. She then asked how it happened, but he wouldn't tell her anymore over the phone. The next day, Shelby and her brother Bo went to Running's office, and he told them everything. He told them that the only charge that they could really go for was manslaughter with a 16-year sentence because it wasn't premeditated, and if Mark hadn't confessed, he probably wouldn't have been caught. Now, Shelby was furious and demanded that he get the death penalty because he had killed 2 people.
Yeah.
But he would say that in Kentucky at this time, it wasn't murder unless the child was born, no matter how far along the mother was in her pregnancy. So even if she was about to give birth, it wouldn't count. But I did look up now. Now there is a fetal homicide law according to the website National Right to Life. So now there's major consequences.
You know what's crazy about that?
Mm.
Is that normally, and I'm not saying that that's the case here because I don't know, normally when a state does not have a law that's pretty current in most other states, and then all of a sudden they get the law or go ahead and, indict the law into their whatever, it's usually because of a very specific case. Like there's something usually that triggers that to happen.
Yeah.
Is this not that case?
I don't know.
Is this not the fact that one of your FBI agents murdered someone? who was pregnant? Is this not the case that would motivate the triggering of initiating that law?
Possibly. I don't know. I just find it crazy that in 1990 there was not a law about it.
Yeah.
But she asked if there would be a trial, and he would tell her no, since there was a plea bargain, and told them that they needed to go back to Pikeville to meet with the grand jury. Now, when she was allowed to go into the courtroom, she explained that Mark had done what Mark had done, and that she didn't want them to accept the plea deal, and that they should give him at least 2 life sentences. Now, after she was done, Runyon escorted her out of the room. Her brother was allowed to go in next, and he told her a similar story, and then he was escorted out of the room. After hearing what Runyon had to say, the grand jury agreed with a 16-year sentence and recommended that the plea bargain be upheld.
I mean, they kind of have to. You kind of have to uphold that. It kind of goes back to that but-for law. You know, but for the fact that you offered him that plea deal, he wouldn't have told you, and then you wouldn't have been able to solve the case.
Yeah.
So, kind of goes back to that whole thing. It works both ways. It works for the law, but it can also work against the law.
Yeah. Now, on June 12th, Mark was brought into the courtroom for sentencing. The judge asked him a lot of questions, with one being, if he did in fact kill Susan, which he would say he did, and after he was done, he sentenced him to 16 years in prison for first-degree manslaughter. He was taken to the Federal Correction Facility in Otisville, New York, for his protection. Now, after it was over, Shelby would say that she thought that the FBI was covering up for Mark and gave him special treatment because he used to be one of their agents. But Runyon would say that he would have went for the same charges in the same situation for, quote, a coal miner.
Yeah.
But, and I just want to say that, all the quotes that I used here were from the book, The FBI Killer by Aphrodite Jones. Again, love the name Aphrodite. So cool. There is a lot more information than I put in here, so if you want to get into more detail, you should definitely go get the book. I'll link it in the show notes. So that is the last part of the tragic murder of Susan Daniels Smith.
I feel like, and somebody's going to come at me for this comment, and that's fine. But I feel like if somebody that works in law enforcement, somebody who has the inside information and knowledge of laws and how the inside process works and things of that nature, if they commit a crime of this caliber, I just feel like their punishment should be worse than somebody who commits this crime, this exact same type of quote-unquote crime where it's one of those where it wasn't premeditated, it was a heat-of-a-moment situation, because an FBI agent who knows if what he claims happened is what actually happened. Because he knows what story to tell to get himself the smallest sentence possible. Mm-hmm. He knows what to hide. He knows what they're going to look for. He knows the process. And that's inside information that most criminals don't have firsthand. Mm-hmm. So I just feel like their punishment should be the opposite. I feel like it should be worse than less. Yeah, because you have to take away their motivation somehow. You know what I mean? Like, if they say, I can kill a whole family and I know how to only get 10 years out of it.
Yeah.
They probably do. They probably know all the loopholes to use and what to say and what story to give and where to put things and what to hide and what evidence, you know what I mean? How to cover the evidence up properly. And because they've worked it. They've been on the other side of the fence that most criminals haven't. So to me, I think it's just insane, first of all, that the baby wasn't included at all in any of his charges or even factored in. And B, that he got a lesser sentence than most people would get.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Because it's probably the only motivation he had for going ahead and committing the crime. Because he knew he wouldn't get very much. Because he knew he could plea out. If he hid the body right, he knew he could plea out and get a deal. Mm-hmm. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. He knew
Somebody
exactly what
might
he's
come
doing.
at me for it, but
honestly, after reading, and saying all this, I wholeheartedly, I'm sure somebody's going to come at me for this too, wholeheartedly believe he planned to kill this woman.
Yeah, I don't buy his story at all. I don't buy his story at all. He probably killed her in a house somewhere. convinced her they were going to talk about the baby
Yeah.
and their future and how they were going to do, work things out between her and the baby and his wife and his family situation. And she went over there probably completely blindsided.
Yeah, unfortunately.
I don't buy a word of what he claimed happened.
Mm-mm.
I just don't.
Nope. Neither do I.
But that's a very sad, tragic story.
It is. It's.
I feel bad mostly for the baby.
Yeah.
But also Susan, obviously.
Well, yeah, of course. It's just neither one of them deserved that. I mean, he could have just, I mean, I know she threatened to do a lot of stuff, but he could have just been like, man up, own it. He told his wife to,
Or you could just not cheat on your wife.
Well, no, I'm
And
saying.
not put yourself in this situation in the first place. But no, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean.
But if you're gonna do that, then,
Be a man. Own up to your mistakes.
yeah, take the responsibility.
Yeah,
You
you're
know?
gonna have to.
Murder, I think we've said this before in other cases, murder doesn't have to be the option.
No.
It doesn't have to be the choice.
So many other decisions, options, choices. So
My husband and I have been talking about this the last couple of days with all the just senseless violence that's been happening recently, and I'm not getting political or anything like that. It has nothing to do with that. It's just talking about, with us doing true crime, it's just talking about human life, man. It's got to be worth more than what is being put on it right now. And
It's
what's
getting scary
always
out
been
there.
put on it. I mean, really, if you look at all of these cases, and, there's thousands of true crime podcasts out there and shows and all kinds of things out there that talk about all these cases and everything, and so many senseless murders throughout history. Just senseless. That just didn't have to happen. Like, think of all the people who, getting a divorce. They'd rather kill the spouse and the kids than just get the divorce. I always go back to the Chris Watts case.
Mm.
I always go back to that case because just senseless. Just senseless.
Agreed.
That doesn't have to be the answer. Anyway, that's my soapbox. And
It's been a while since you've had one, so.
I know, I haven't had to have one in a minute because we haven't recorded in so long. But you know what? I've got to tell you, I actually really, really like this setup much better.
Yeah.
And I really hope that all of you guys out there in YouTube land or podcast land or wherever you're watching this or listening to this at, I hope that, well, I guess if you're listening, you're not seeing it, but wherever you're watching this at, well, if you're listening, I hope it sounds better. I hope the sound quality has increased and is better than it was previously in our other location. But yeah, anyway, I'm done. That's it.
Well, we appreciate you for sticking around, and again, sorry for the 2-week gap
Sabbatical
there.
we had there.
Sorry.
Non-voluntary sabbatical we had there.
Hopefully it won't happen again, but, life happens, and...
Yeah, it is what it is. But you know what? We got something kind of good out of it in the sense that we got a better space. So,
Yeah.
kind of like
Nice.
a fresh start, I guess. Sort of in a way.
I just gotta find something to put me in here.
I know. I told her she had to bring, because we're still at my space. So I told her to bring some of her stuff to make it her personal space. To add a flair of Fallon. Sounds like a meal. Would it be microwavable? Probably.
Never.
Microwavable flair of Fallon.
No. Never.
It's a pasta. Sounds like a pasta.
I'm not sure everybody's
bow
enjoying
tie.
this
All right.
conversation.
Sorry.
That's funny.
All right. That's it for me. You got anything else? All right.
Thank
Well,
you. If you like what we are doing, please like, share, subscribe, say hi.
Follow.
Yes. On all
Stalk
of the
us.
social medias, we are a part of all of those.
Yeah, we got a website. I mean, there's you literally, if you type in, I think even render at this point, you're gonna get something that has us in it.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, we've been doing it long enough now. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you guys. We really appreciate it, and hopefully we'll see you next time.
Bye.